This one's a little different. What you're looking at here isn't a single photograph, it's actually a panorama built from 26 individual frames of a swallow diving into the water. Now, I originally shared this image in a World in Focus video last year. That's the sister channel I run with my good friend Mark, where we focus more on camera gear and broader photography topics. I'll link that in the description down below. It was part of a video where I was comparing the Canon R5 and R6 against the Mark II bodies. And I got asked the same question quite a few times afterwards, which was, how did you make that swallow panorama? So in this video, I want to walk you through the entire process from a high-speed burst of heavily cropped images right through to assembling them into one long flowing sequence. Now, it's not a perfect image. It's definitely a just for fun project, but it's a really nice way of thinking differently about the bursts that we all capture when shooting wildlife. And instead of just picking one frame and moving on, making a project from a whole batch of images. Now, fair warning, there is a fair bit of manual work involved here, but really that's half the fun. It's also worth saying at this point, even though this was shot on a 45 megapixel sensor, these birds were tiny in the frame. Everything here is heavily cropped, so yes, there's a bit of grain and a bit less detail than a single hero frame, but for this kind of sequence image, that trade-off I think is completely fine. So this is just a fun little project, obviously, but I have my 26 images of the swallow taking a bath open in Adobe Bridge. Let's bring them into Camera Raw, and the first thing I'll do, you'll notice they're all underexposed. The first thing I'll do is select all, Command A, and let's bring my exposure up. So bring up around about 30 to 40 points. It's really the shadows that I'm looking to raise here. So let's bring up the shadows, start to see into the bird, bring up the whites by 15 or so points, drop back my blacks, and let's bring up my exposure that little bit more so we start to see into the bird. Now, I'm not worried about the background because I'm going to lose that, get rid of it altogether. So that's pretty good. It's a good starting point, and I can go a little bit higher on the exposure. That's not bad. So you'll see that we're starting to see some detail in the bird here from shots that I probably otherwise wouldn't use. Now, with all of them selected, I'm going to go to zoom to 100%. Let's just get a look at the bird. Now, you can see it is a little bit grainy. That's fine. We'll fix that with some denoising, and it's all part of a sequence anyway. The next thing that I want to do is just add a little bit of sharpening to all of the birds as well. So Command A, make sure everything is selected. Come down to the Sharpening tab, holding on the Option Alt key as usual, drag across to the right on the Masking tab. Holding down Option Alt reveals where you will be sharpening, basically. White denotes what will be sharpened, black what won't be sharpened, so that's pretty good. Let's drag up the sharpening slider to around about 190 to 100 points. That's about right. That's fine. That should do the trick. Okay, so with all of the files now having had a global adjustment, let's go over to the Masking tab. So Command A to select all of them again. Come over to the Masking tab, and I'm going to select the subject. Now, there are 26 files for it to select, so it will take a little while to do this. But now that we've selected all of the subjects, let's give ourselves some more options by going over to the More Options tab, clicking on it, and let's say duplicate and invert the mask. And again, it's got a lot of files to go through, so it will take a little while. And that's selected the background. Perfect. Okay, so we've got masks for both the background and the subject. We can obviously refine these masks, and that's what we'll do. With the subject mask, for example, Command A to select all of them. If we look at mask 1, that's our subject. You'll see that in between the bird's feathers, and this will go throughout the images, it's selected a bit of the background. I don't want that. If I make an adjustment to the bird, I want it to be on the bird only. So with all of these masks selected, what I need to do is go to Subtract and say get rid of the sky. So again, it's going to take a while to go through, but it's just a nice way of refining, quick way of refining the masks. I will go back and double check them and, if necessary, add or subtract using a brush, but this is just a good starting point. Okay, that's pretty good. Now, let's go to Mask 1 Inverted, which is the background,
And what we want to do here, I'm actually going to blow the background out. I really want to blow out the background and lose it altogether in my shots. So we'll bring that up, and I'm not going to bring it up too high. I'll bring it up to about 40 points because I don't want to lose detail around the feather. If you take it too high, you start to lose. You notice the feathers contract there. I don't know if you can see that on the YouTube video, but the feathers start to contract because it's eating into the bird. So around about 40, 45 points. I'm going to push my whites up that little bit, about 15 or 20 points there, and that just blows that background nicely for me there. A little bit of blacks down in the background is not going to make that much difference. It just might sharpen the edges of the bird that's slightly there. So about -3 points. And I'm also thinking about the water droplets. It will have an effect on those too. Now, what I do want to do, if I come down to, let's find a water splash bit here, click on that and drag the file over so that we can see it. Okay, what I do want to do, there's quite a little blue in here which I kind of want to get rid of, to be honest. So let's make sure we've got all of them selected again. We're still on that mask one inverted, and let's just drag the saturation down. I'd rather it be more of a graphic image there. So actually, I'm going to get rid of that altogether there. That's pretty good. Now, some of the blue remains because obviously that's attached to the subject file. The subject, the bird, and that's fine. I don't mind that. A little bit of blue in that is fine, but I didn't want it anywhere ghosting around the bird there. You'll notice I'm going to have to go through all the files. I won't bore you with getting you to watch all of that, but I'm going to have to go through all of the files. And just with this selected here, I need to add in with a brush just between sort of areas like the bird's feather here. As I say, I've got to do this for 25 files, so I'm not going to bore you with watching all of these, but that's just the way I'm going to clean up the masks. So with all of those now selected and looking pretty good, let's just check these ones. These ones at the end particularly I'm going to need to clean up. You'll notice here with the mask one inverted, if I look at that, you can see where it's actually missed. So all I need to do there is to add that sky to the background with the adding a brush and just come in and paint in between the bird's feathers. Like I say, I won't bore you with that on the recording, but you'll see that it will make a big difference when it comes to putting all the images together. Okay, before I do that though, what I want to do with the bird. So let's go back up to the top and we'll select the first bird, for example. Press Command A, so I'm selecting all of the files. Mask 1 was my subject. I'm just going to increase my exposure again a little bit more. I'm definitely going to increase my saturation. I want some more blue in there. And I do maybe a little bit of clarity, a little bit of mid-tone contrast, a little bit of shadow lift, a little bit of blacks down, so it's a little bit more contrast. And I might push the... Yeah, I'm going to push the saturation a little bit more. Okay. Okay, yeah, so I'm happy with that. Now, that's all of the masks pretty much taken care of. I'll need to go back and clean them up, as I mentioned. But the next thing to do is to really crop all of the images. So let's move on and do that next. Now, I want to crop them at the same ratio, even though the images are going to be this image here. Obviously, I could crop in much, much tighter than, say, an image of the splash. But if I do that, then the bird will appear at different sizes throughout the panorama. So I can't do that. So I do need to maintain the same crop ratio. So with all of the images selected, so click on the first image, Command A selects all of them. Select the crop tool, press C for crop. And if I press the X key, that inverts the crop ratio. Now, it's now just a question really of just lining it up on the bird. And that's fine for the first couple of frames. Might move that over a little bit. Gives me a little bit more room to work. I'm going to blend the background away anyway, so it's not an issue. But I do want to maintain the same aspect ratio. And this just makes it easier when I bring them into Photoshop. So just put that splash in the middle. Go through and do all of these. I may crop some of the splash out a little later on. That's not bad. Keep going. There we go. And let's just keep cropping through. Now you'll notice here I'm starting to lose some of the droplets to the side. I'm not so worried about that. I'd rather maintain the focus, if you like, on the bird. Looks like a shark. There we go. And I like the water plume, the droplets coming across, and just as he's starting to come out of the water. And yeah, that's not bad. I'll maintain that right edge. I may actually go to a freestyle so we don't constrain the aspect ratio on this particular one. Just give me a little bit more space there. I can always play with it once I get it into my Photoshop final file and blend that with the file next to it. That's just keeping that right edge in it and just drag that across so I get the water droplets. And again, I can blend. So that's not bad. It maintains, the ratio will still be, on the bird will still be the same though. So that's okay because I'm going to load these all into layers. It's fine. And there. Now just a few more to go. I may not even use all of these files. I may decide I don't need that many files in the final image. Okay, that's not bad. And this one's not a particularly interesting file. Do I need it? I don't know. Let's just see how we go. Let's go back and put him more in the middle. Come back. And that one's not bad. And that one I like. Okay, so that's all of the images now cropped. So the next thing to do is to say done. And what I'll do now is just have all of my files ready to go. So we need now just to bring them into Photoshop. Now the easiest way to do this is Tools, Photoshop, load files into Photoshop layers. This will save me opening them all and dragging them all into one whole file. This will load them all into one particular file, but layered one on top of each other. So if I do that, it'll now load them in, and it does take a while to prepare this. And there we have it. All of our images are now open in Photoshop in one file as separate layers. Now it's time to start assembling the panorama. So the next step in creating our panorama is obviously to create a background canvas. And the way I've done this is simply come up to File, New, and I've created my own custom size canvas. Now I've gone with 30,000 pixels for the width and 5,000 pixels for the height. The 5,000 pixels I've basically judged off of the height of the swallow images. The width, however, I've completely guessed. I don't know here if that's going to be enough, but it's something I can always extend or crop later on. And I've just clicked Create to create that canvas. So with that done, the next thing we need to do is come to our swallow shots, make sure they're all selected by clicking on the top of the stack, going to the bottom, and dragging across to our panoramic canvas. And before you let go, just press the Shift key and that'll put them all in the middle of your canvas. Press the F key to go to full screen mode, and that just makes it a little bit easier. You don't have that cluttered background with the substack of the swallows. So what we're going to do now is drag them all across to the right hand side. Just click and drag. Notice that as I do so, the little pink purple guide appears, and that just tells you that you're keeping them centered, which is exactly what you want. So I've just dragged them across to the right hand side. Now what I want to do is effectively remove the white from around each swallow so that I can position them easily and create my sort of flowing panoramic image, capturing the action. Now the easiest way to do this is to use the blend if layer style. Before I do that, however, blending white against white would be very difficult, as you might imagine. So the easiest way to tackle that is come down to your background layer, and if you come over to your color picker palette on your toolbar, you'll notice that black is set as the foreground color, white is set as the background color. To fill the background with the black, if I press and hold Option Backspace or Option Delete, that will fill the background canvas with the foreground color set in your color picker. Alternatively, if you press Command and Backspace or Command and Delete, it will fill it with the background color in your color picker. Obviously, we want black for this instance, just to make the blending easier. So Command and Backspace, and that selects the black color from the color picker and fills it into the background of our canvas. Now what I want to do, come back up to the top. I'll just grab my first image and drag that out of the way so it's just easier to work with this way. So let's zoom in onto this, and with this image selected, now if I double click on the layer itself, the layer thumbnail, it will bring up the layer style dialog box. And I'm interested in the blend if little sliders at the bottom of the box here. What this is basically saying is based on luminance values, anything in the layer below that is black is represented on the left-hand side, on the left-hand side, and anything that is in the current layer, in other words, the swallow layer, I said layer below, I meant the top layer. Anything in the top layer that is white is represented on the right-hand side. So if I want to get rid of the white and convert it to black, I simply need to grab the little triangle here and drag it across. Notice that as I do so, however, it's very harsh. It goes from 255, and then you drop one luminance value, and it goes completely to black immediately. So the best way to do this, I'm just going to move that out of the way so you can see, is to hold down the Option or Alt key and split this little triangle. Now it's a gradual transition, and it will be softer on the feathers as well around the bird. So that looks pretty good to me now. I'm going to click OK there, and basically what I've done is I've blended anything that was white in the image to black. So I've just blended that to the layer below. What I want to do now, because this, if we come across to our actual layer, you'll see this little couple of squares here. This denotes that a layer style has been applied. In this instance, the blend if layer style. So rather than laboriously do it for every layer, all I need to do is right-click, copy this layer style, click the next layer below, scroll down to the bottom, shift-click to select them all, and then right-click again to paste that layer style. And they'll now all blend to the black background below. So that's pretty good. Now let's just move our initial swallow back to his starting spot. And looking at this now, it looks like a complete mess. You're thinking, well, what do we do now? This looks like a complete mess, but we're going to fix that. First way to do this, of course, is to come down to the background layer, and we want to turn this back to a white background. So pressing down the Command and Backspace or Delete key on a Mac converts this back to a white background. So our first image pretty much can stay where it is, our first layer. But if I now select the next layer below and all of the other layers and drag across, I've just moved them a little bit, and I've got the second bird, which is where my cursor is now, just edging ahead of the first one. So let's come back up. I've now moved this layer, so just going to deselect it by pressing the Command key on my Mac, and now I've just got the rest of the layer stack drag across. Okay, and it's really it's boring to watch, but this is basically what I'm doing from this point on. So I won't make you watch me do all of these because it will be very dull, but I will just now position them all so they're in the right spot for my panorama. Okay, so the next step is let's just center them, all of the images. So I drag out a guide. It's at 50% on the canvas. So what I want to do, you'll notice the fifth bird in is a little below that line. So we want to basically centralize every bird there. And that means I'm going to have to shuffle some around anyway. So selecting the bottom layer, let's go to the top, and we'll just nudge that. I'm using the up arrow key, so that bird is, yeah, just its beak's on the line. That looks pretty good. Okay, now I need to just select the individual layers and nudge those around so that they are centralized as well. Again, I won't make you watch all of that. I'll just get that done. Okay, so that's arranged all of the birds now. If I go up to the first snapshot, saved just before I rearranged them, you can see they're all out of place. Now, the second one shows them clearly in the middle of the frame, and that's what I wanted to do. Snapshots, incidentally, are just when you're working in history, you can take a little, click on the little camera icon, create a snapshot, or basically record that point in history, and you can then go back to it at any time. Very handy if sometimes you're working with many different changes you're making to a file. Your history will sometimes roll off the clipboard because you can only save about 20 or 30 states of history. You can save an infinite number of states, I should say, but it slows down your memory. So you have to sort of cap it, really. So I like to use snapshots just to see how far I've come whilst I'm working on a file. Okay, so back to our story. What we need to do now is just zoom in, and I'll position the canvas. What I'm looking to do is basically blend the layers between each other. So I've got this particular layer 9135 selected. If I turn it on and off, you can see that it just blends into the layer that comes after it. So I obviously want to fix that. So with that layer selected, click down to the very bottom here. You'll see the little rectangle with the circle in the middle of it, the black circle in it. That denotes that you're going to put a layer mask on it. Adding a layer mask means that with a black paintbrush, black reveals, white conceals. With a black paintbrush, I can reveal what's underneath this particular layer, which in this instance is the layer below. Now, I've just noticed I'm painting at 70%, which I don't want to do. I want to paint at 100% here to completely reveal. So if you notice at the top, it says 70%. Keyboard shortcut to get back to 100% opacity with your brush is just to press the 0 key. So let's just paint that away and free up this layer so that we can see it in its entirety. Now it's just a question really of going through and cleaning up the rest of the layers. So here we have, for example, this particular layer. I believe it's this layer. It could still be this layer that is obscuring the layer of the little bird poking its head out of the water. So let's add a layer mask to the, you can see if I switch that layer on and off, and that's the quickest way to determine which one is the culprit. That's going to need to be masked as well. So we add a layer mask here, and I just mask that away. Again, I'm going to go through all of the images and do this. I won't make you watch this because it will get very boring, but I will come back to you when I've done the complete layer masking. Okay, so having masked all of the images so that they blend into each other nicely, you'll notice that my next problem is that I have some water that's blue and some that's black and white. So what I need to do there is, first thing I want to do is make a composite of all of the layers and put them onto one standalone layer. And the way to do this is to press Command, Option, Shift, and E. Think of it like you're moving everything, hence the E, to one layer. And I've now got a layer that contains all of the layers below on its own separate layer. So I can now start to apply some adjustments to this layer. I could clone if I wanted to. I don't need to in this particular instance, but what I do want to do is paint where the water, I don't want it to be black and white and then blue. I want to make it consistent. So what I'm going to do is come over to the toolbox, click on the eyedropper tool, I for eyedropper, and select an area in the image where I have the blue in the water. If I click there, you'll notice that it positions the blue, the color I've just selected, onto my color picker. So I can now paint with that. If I press B for the brush tool, and I've currently got it set to color, and that's actually what I want. Normally it's at normal. If you're at normal, you'd just paint like so. It will affect all of the pixels below and cover them up. That's not what I'm after, so I'm going to undo that by pressing Command Z. What I want to do is for the paint to actually blend with the pixels and the texture below. So if I select the color option, now when I paint, it blends with the pixels below, so it doesn't just color them. Now I might actually undo that, and I'm going to pick a slightly darker color. Let's just go for a darker blue here. Yeah, that's better. Okay, now with the brush tool selected again, rather than paint straight away, I'm going to lower the opacity on the brush. So let's say we're going to make it 70%. I just hit the 7 key on my keyboard, and it drops the brush's opacity to 70%. Now when I paint, it looks a little bit more natural. That's better. So let's just tidy this up. And then I think we're good to almost output. That's pretty good. Yeah. Okay. I'm pretty happy with that. I think the next step is to do some noise reduction on the image, maybe a little bit of sharpening and output. Okay, so the last step is just a little bit of sharpening. Now, I like to sharpen on a separate layer. That way I have much more control. I can always reduce the opacity of that layer, thus reducing the amount of sharpening once I've applied it. So what I'll do is, with the layer 1 selected, press Command J, and that brings up a new layer. What I can then do is go to my filters. I'm, in this instance, going to use Photo AI, a Topaz Labs product. I also use DxO Pure Raw. I like I find that some images benefit from DxO, some images benefit from Topaz, some images I just use the sharpening in Adobe Camera Raw, as you've seen before. What I want to do is, I don't use the autopilot necessarily, I just use the sharpen tool, and it will detect what it thinks is the best setting for that image. And yeah, it's gone with the lens blur. I think that works for this image. Let's just say export to Photoshop, and we are now done. So there we have the final sharpened output file. I'll just scroll across so you can get an idea of the sequence. All of this courtesy of the R5 Mark II and the RF 100 to 500 with the 1.4 times teleconverter. Now, these birds were very tiny in the frame, which is why they're a little bit grainy. I've sharpened them up nicely using Topaz. But yeah, just a really fun little projects to work on. And it's just nice to see what you can achieve with the 30 frames per second from the camera.
So that's the finished panorama. Now I have to ask, have you ever thought about using a burst sequence like this, not to find the best frame, but to build something completely different? If you have, please let me know in the comments down below. I love hearing from other photographers and about their creative work. Now honestly, I still don't know where I'd hang something like this. I'd definitely need a bigger house, but that's not really the point. For me, this was just a really fun way to use a high-speed burst and see what happens when you stop thinking in terms of a single best frame. Now on screen is an alternate version of the panorama, captured at the same time but with a full colour theme instead. And this one also came from the original World in Focus video. And as I said, I'll link that video in the description down below if you want to see the broader camera comparison that this image came from. So please do check it out. As always, if you enjoyed this kind of slightly experimental processing breakdown, let me know. A like really helps the channel. And if you want more processing-led videos and the occasional gear review or personal project, then please do feel free to subscribe. There's plenty more of this coming. Thank you.